Greetings! Welcome to the Devlog for experimental build 5 of update 111 of hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. We're going to start off as always with a quick sound check. Make sure speakers aren't up too high. Wonderful. So what have we got for you this week? Well, I've been trucking along on our new institution level, have a bunch of stuff to show you folks today on that. And of course, the Unity drama continues. There was just another big announcement just a couple hours ago, and so I figured I'd cover some things related to that, as well as answer a whole bunch of questions and common comments that arose in last week's video. But we'll cover that at the end. To start off, though, with our fun stuff, our explosive stuff, I thought I would show you some things related to one of our big environmental hazards, which required a bunch of support systems to get online. The first of which is that I have implemented, finally, you'd think this would have been in the game engine or in H3 setup earlier, a better system for handling ambient looping sounds. So in H3, basically, there are constant ambiances, which if we come back here, is just the sort of room tone that you're hearing here. And that's been enough for H3 for most of what is present. But this level has a whole bunch of big, loud, looping things like, you know, humming transformer rooms like this. And so there's now a system in place for me to be able to place those to make different areas of the level sound more interesting. I've turned down the frequency of the little zap events on these for a very good reason, which is that I got implemented the thing that I had mentioned last time that we covered this. We get a poor little testing scout here. Poor little guy. He has no idea what's coming. And I'm going to put a suppressor on this so that you can hear the sound. Basically, the way these now work is that if we shoot one of these transformers, we get a little random electrical discharge. That discharge is quote-unquote a smart one in that basically it does a volume cast roughly around the area that has been struck, so if there is either you or one of the SOSIGs within range of it, it arcs to...
Time out for me, I guess.
Yup. It arcs to essentially the nearest, a random nearby agent body entity collider. And so once this is fully functional, this will actually not just affect the SOSIGs, it will affect some of the constructs, and there's going to be at least one moving construct that actually is vulnerable to electrical damage. And so using these rooms to deal with them will be one of the strategies that you will have available to you. Actually, you know what? Let's get a weapon that fires a little faster, a little more frequently. It is just a terrible job being a tester for me. Etc. Oh, he's still here. Sorry about that. Whammo. And so yeah, it's just another example of one of the many dynamic things I'm trying to add into this level. Basically, I want it to be the case that if you look at it and be like, I wonder if something cool happens if I shoot that, I want there to be a cool thing that happens when you shoot it. So yeah, moving along. So I edited out what happened when I loaded into this scene. It was very funny. I was testing a floater mine in the editor just before doing this and had left it right at the scene origin. So I loaded into the scene, my head was in a mine, and it exploded. Good stuff, Anton, good stuff. So, the main thing that is present here that is new this week for you to play with, aside from our sort of new destructibles, I tuned those, so those should work a bit better, is I've changed a bunch and tuned a bunch of the constructs. So some of the constructs that don't require specific scene setup, you can actually spawn yourself. So if you want to play around with floater mines, you can now do so using the SOSIG spawner. My favorite way to test these actually is just with a throwing knife, because they respond to those collisions. There's a whole bunch of new sounds in, so like these were using a generic explosion before, and they're now using a new one that Joe made for us. Much cooler exploding sound now. Oh, come on, you can do it. Blammo. That is so neat. That is so much fun. So yeah, I tuned a few things about the exploding barrels. Let's see if I can hit one from here. Nope. Third tries a charm. Boom! Look at that. Beautiful stuff, beautiful stuff. The irises are in here as well. I'm gonna, before the build, but after the devlog, I'm gonna actually make a new setting here. So these aren't under encryptions, but are under constructs. I won't spawn an iris because it will attack me, but the irises are in there for you to play around with. What else? I fixed a bunch of the Sentinel's damage stuff. Oh, and importantly, these now, at request, a bunch of people were like, why doesn't the cool explodey catapult thing actually fire the energy balls that I made for the AR3? Well, here you go. Don't say I never give you nothing. Jeez. Those are real intense in a group going by in VR. Cool. So that is in there. Beyond that, as I said, most of what I did this week was just working on new environment stuff that is not in this preview scene because it's in other sectors of the level. But yeah, I'll go ahead and jump out and talk about just major level progress now. Yo! So I forgot to actually show off because it's just been a frazzled kind of day, like last minute bug fixing. The Balistic construct also got updated. I made it so that its sensing lasers are no longer super bright, but are actually semi-transparent. You actually have to pay attention to them. And once again, added in some new sound that the Joe authored for them that is super sweet. There's actually, they've got a randomized speed range as well. So some of them that you come across, the sort of speed that they're sensing at you will be about this fast. And then some of them are significantly faster, just to vary up the challenge, make it something that you have to pay attention to, you know, when you have to jump and things like that. One thing to be aware of is that the vaporizing energy bullets that the node now fires that I'd made for the like H3 version of the AR3 rifle years ago were not super robustly implemented. So they vaporize SOSIGs, but they don't actually do any damage to anything else that they strike. At the moment, I am going to fix that. It was something that I just forgot to get back to. And now that I put them in, started using them again, I was like, wait a minute, there's a to-do in this script that I had forgotten about. Really need to like learn to search, you know, find all the words to do. How many things have you left behind, Anton? So yeah, on top of the game stuff, obviously, as I mentioned, the Unity drama, train wreck, whatever you want to call it, continues. It was very polite of them to get out an update to what was going on before it was time for me to film a devlog today. And obviously it just occurred a couple hours ago. So if you're like, how much time have you even had to think about this and process it? Not very long. But I'm just going to sort of do the best to just, seeing as I covered this last week, let you know what changed, what they sort of came back with after all of the community outcry. They're still obviously just plowing forward on this, just in a modified form because they think they have to. I don't know enough about that sort of tier of business to know if that's a they have to or they think they have to, or if it's just the nightmare engine that all large public corporations are caught up in the first place means that these sorts of things are some shade of inevitable. But yeah, so they got rid of, or seemed to kind of get rid of, the installs metric, which we all sort of like. I feel like if you introduce a business term and a random 14-year-old can be like, that sounds like that wouldn't work for these common sense reasons, someone should be fired. But no one was fired. But they sort of got rid of it. They basically built a system where it caps at 2.5% rev share, and you self-report the number of people who have engaged with your application. So it's like simultaneously they got more specific with certain things, less specific with others. It's the sort of mess I've come to expect from them almost reassuring in that way. They raised the revenue cap for using the free version of Unity. So it looks like these changes don't impact, like if you make just tiny indie games or give your games away for free or things like that, it looks like you're no longer going to be accidentally screwed over by this. It's just going to be the slow bleed of a community that has completely lost trust in the entity that makes said engine. And apparently they actually like brought back the terms of service GitHub that they just deleted and said nothing about. I don't know. I don't think they apologized for that or addressed the fact that, that makes them all seem like shifty liars, but not addressing it is also a thing a shifty liar would do. So at least they're being consistent with last week. It's on one hand, this is measurably less disastrous than last week, because at the very least, with the way in which they've made it so that you can use the older terms of service, if you're on an older version of the engine, you at least now have some time to transition to another engine, if that's your speed, instead of having like less than 3 months, which was the situation last week. But obviously, like the problem with all of this is that they've still, shattered any trust that a reasonable person would have in them. And so I think we're going to continue to see, it might have changed the speed at which everyone needs to transition, but like, this is clearly not a trustworthy or competent company in the long run. Like, even if you, for some reason, now trust that they're on our side sort of thing, this was all bungled to a degree that no one has ever screwed up this scale of things. So I can't imagine anyone new wanting to hitch their wagon to this engine. To address a bunch of common questions that came up last week, let's just go down the list here. So will H3 be impacted by this? Last week it was a, I don't know, maybe sort of thing. Now it appears not, because we're still running Unity 5.6, if you didn't know. It's a very old version of the engine, and that is not going to change. So apparently we're fine now. Is H3 being ported to something? No, give me a break. Like, as I said, the game runs on Unity 5.6. We haven't migrated it to modern Unity, or even kind of modern Unity, because the volume of changes that have occurred has made that just not something sensible. And frankly put, since the mod community has grown so much, and that Unity bundles aren't forward compatible in a great way, it would absolutely annihilate tons of modding work if we ever were going to be like, let's upgrade it to Unity 2023. So that wasn't on the table to begin with. And so porting it to a completely different tool chain with a completely different physics engine setup and entity ontology and all of that is a preposterous notion. You just start over at that point, because it would be like starting over. Am I going to be learning Godot? I'll definitely be peeking at it for sure. I'm rarely an early adopter of new tools. I'm kind of a stuck in my ways kind of person. I use an 8-year-old version of Maya, despite Blender clearly being the smarter option to use these days for most things. And a lot of that is like, I don't enjoy learning new software to learn new software. You know what I mean? I'm not a technophile. If I could just make it so that my phone just never changed, like it makes phone calls, I can look at web pages, just have the buttons all just be the same forever. I don't care. I don't care about the new things they add to these. I would hit that button every time, because I just prefer to use my brain power on other things. Part of the reason that I'm still working on H3 and enjoy doing it is that it's mature enough at this point, as as a giant pyramid of technical debt, that I can actually focus on content, which is what this past year has been about to a huge degree, instead of internally fighting with new systems and things like that. And to learn a new engine in a big way for me would be like starting from ground zero, and I'm 39 and tired, and so that sounds terrible. And I know that sounds like a tantrum, but there you go. Am I going to learn the Unreal Engine? No, give me a break. Beyond what I've already said, I find it hilarious that everyone thinks that shifting away from an engine for a bad business model reason to Unreal would be a good idea, given that this is an engine that has favorable terms, in part because Fortnite just prints money endlessly. If that ever changes, what do you think they're going to do? Moreover, like the business segment that they're trying to compete with, like in a really important way, Unity is not even their long-term competitor. Unity's too incompetent to be that. They're competing with Roblox. Like they're in the new like restricted rights pseudo platform that monetizes child labor market. That's what Fortnite Creative is. Because if you can create one of those types of super managed platforms, you can get everyone making content for your engine, and then instead of it being like you take a little bit of money and they get the rest of it, it's more like you keep almost all of the money and you give the user player a tiny pittance of it. And so that's clearly the segment that they're interested in long term. And honestly, to be real depressing for a moment, I think that's probably going to be the long term trend of paid engines, period, because the way that this all works is about monetizing that overlap between play and creation more and more, and doing that in a set of terms because they control the entire stack. Like you make a game in one of these pseudo platforms, everything you've made is way more proprietarily dependent on that platform. Like you can't port something you make in Fortnite Creative out of it to somewhere else. And that's a value add for a platform because they've got you. So yeah, no. And it's hard with all of this, right? Because I would love this entire situation to be better, but the reality of the games industry, the tech industry writ large, is that we tend to accept really, really horrible, exploitation as just a matter of course. I tweeted earlier today, on one hand, a bunch of the industry is saying that they can't trust a bunch of lying, manipulative psychos with their engine choice now and need to switch. On the other hand, the entire VR industry decided a bunch of lying, manipulative psychos, i.e. Meta, were fine to be in charge of everything. And if you're doing VR, if you're trying to make, a VR pretty much anything, you just accept that as, part of doing business. And pretty much every developer in VR, even the ones with a front row seat to the worst of their behavior when they were at their worst, just sort of shrugged and accepted it as a cost of doing business. And that's what we're all stuck with now. And so it just happens to be that just tech culture in general and tech business and games culture doesn't have a strong philosophy towards collective action. Like, by all rights, what's happening right now with the WGA and the SGA should have occurred in the games industry in a moment like this. Like, if every single developer working on Unity was like, no, this is unacceptable and we're not going to pay you a cent, period, happened, Unity would have no choice. They have nowhere else to get that revenue for. They would have to come back with something substantively more reasonable. But they knew, because this is games and this is software development in general, and people just roll over in this segment, that they could toss out a few scraps in the forms of, some subtle term adjustments and taking a splash screen away, and people would just accept it because we're all just acclimated to that type of exploitation in this. So this is all to say, if you're really, really young, learn all of the open source tools and just don't put yourself in a career position where 10, 20 years from where you are now, you're having to deal like this. Like, you want to be in the situation where you can just watch from the sidelines and laugh and be like, that's all terrible for you, but I made the right decisions. You know, it probably would have been smart if I had listened back when I was in grad school or undergrad to all of the like cranky older developers who knew better, who was like, use free and open software. Like, you just, this entire categories of life problems you won't have if you do that. And I sort of scoffed at it. And now I'm an idiot for being in the situation I'm in. So I guess don't be like Anton. Don't be an idiot. So that's just about it. That's the end of the second Unity diatribe, which will hopefully be the last Unity diatribe, unless they just find some new way to make this worse next year, which who knows? They might. I'm going to continue, chugging along on this. I know there's not a ton in this new alpha this week because it's been, as I said, it's mostly been like entity tweaks, bug fixing, and working on new parts of the level. I'll have more of those to show off next week. Excitedly, I am almost to the end of the primary geometric modeling of this level. I basically have 2 transit stations left, and I have to finish 1 hold room that I've blocked out. And then I can just basically be like, the modeling on the level is done. And then it's about VFX and sound and game systems and things like that. So looking at, I don't want to promise anything, but it's looking like, assuming nothing explodes, October will be the moment that you will be able to actually step into this level in some form and actually try it out, which is what I'm really aiming for. And I'm super excited about. So I can't wait to get this all in your hands and just, bring Take and Hold up to the scale and complexity that I had always dreamed of doing and have finally gotten around to doing. So I hope you all have yourselves a wonderful and stress-free weekend. And I will see you all next week. Peace.